Hello everyone, so my name is Cláudio Farias. I'm presenting this work, connecting the missing link through pedagogical scaffolding. So basically I'm bringing you a proposal, a pedagogical proposal with some practical strategies for those of you who want to work within a frame of game-based approach, but to be able to successfully engage more actively students in the teaching learning process, okay, with higher responsibility. Three main points. First, some context, then some underpinning assertions that uphold this presentation, and then the practical proposal in itself. So when we think about the worldwide curriculum, increasingly we see in every physical education curriculum around the world that physical education is supposed to develop a multidimensional outcome set. So we are not looking only, but also to motor skill development, to physical fitness development, to understanding. So we are looking at lifelong learning development, so skills of self-regulation skills, also from a social perspective, that students develop a social conscious citizenship, to think critically, to have skills for collaborative problem solving. So our contention here is that game-based approach, you can use game-based approach if we provided an additional upgrade, let's say, of pedagogical skills, like the pedagogies, like peer teaching and peer coaching, student-led tasks, embedding issues of social justice, equity, and responsibility into the content development. So if we can use as a game the main frame, the tactical games approach, and the game-based approach to aspire to higher outcome development in physical education. So this also implies that there is a progressive transfer and learner active engagement. So if we pick up on a content development work session of tactical games, a typical one. So the teacher or the coach leads task presentation and feedback. Usually have one game, then a practice task, then we go back to the same game with more skills. Well, in this perspective, so we would have something like, okay, the teacher coach presents the main game, but then, for example, the teacher can share the assessment, the feedback provision with a student coach as the task progress. And at a given point, for example, when revisiting the similar game, okay, we can ask students, now you will represent the game because the students will be already familiar with the task. So, and as this progresses, student in the game, if we, for example, in the beginning of a lesson, we drew on a previous game that the students are familiar, so they can already present the task themselves, like of repeating the task and lead feedback. And then if we need to introduce a new game or a more complex game, then the teacher again takes the lead in task presentation, but the feedback is shared, and so on. So this presents a different logic of responsibility, kind of distribution between teacher and students. So, and this brings us with one of a core concept in student-centered pedagogies, which is scaffolding. So scaffolding is kind of those pedagogical structures and strategies that we put in place to progressively transfer responsibility to students. So And as students become more and more responsible and take on more decision-making power, as they become more competent, not only as players, but also as peer coaches, as good collaborative mates in terms of building collaborative knowledge and problem-solving tasks with their peers. So the teacher kind of fades the support. So there is this interaction. And in this sense, well, we present you one potential arrangement of the content of the knowledge structure about scaffolding, which can involve intentions, means, and settings and operations. Well, this presentation, the practical topic next, will be mostly focused on the setting and operations. But this, you can check this later when you have access to the videos, and you can, well, play with it, reverse and forward to have a more insightful notion of what may include this. So about the scaffolding intentions, this one first, I will give you an example. For example, keeping the learner on target and maintaining their pursuit of a particular learning goal. So there are strategies. If we want to prepare students to become good problem solver detectors and then peer feedbacks, so there is structures that we can put in place. For example, if we put like this example, if you can read it while I go through it. So for example, if we structure a session that we say, okay, these 3v3 invasion games, the first 10 minutes you just play, okay? So you specifically structure the pacing of task transitions to keep students on kind of a pathway to make sure that they engage in all those pedagogies, those interactions that you want them to engage. For example, you can set specifically that after the first gameplay block, teams have 2 minutes to discuss the problems. So this is embedded in the content development of that session. And then you can say, okay, in the next 10 minutes, now, yes, the student coaches, you can stop the game and kind of reinforce and talk with your mates to identify problems. So you kind of establish a pacing. For example, in this, this is a in-between games moment. So the teams know that there are 3 teams, learning teams, that they have now room to discuss particular points. So while this team prefers to slow down the game, this red one, you can see it, but slow down the game and practice some moves. The black team, they are already just hanging around, and the orange team, they are specifically teaching about this kind. This was like dribbling with the ball to their mates who had more troubles in the previous game. Okay, now for the core part, practical part of this presentation. So what kind of settings and operations we need to put in place to assure that all those pedagogies, collaborative problem solving skills, critical thinking, all this is in place. So some of them can be guided practice, guided task organization, guided task. So as I was saying, guided practice, guided task organization, guided task presentation, pre-post session, briefing, group discussions, and many other. So, for example, this one, the guided practice is important. So in this case, we are introducing a new task. So we are engaging those students that will lead the task as peer coaches. to engaging them in the content presentation. I'll go again. So that they get familiar, hands-on with the content that we are going to introduce. And then, well, these leaders, they have their own cards, and then they implement, kind of repeat the instruction or implement the task in their own cards. So there was this kind of pre-guidance, and this is more powerful than, for example, a task card, because it lends itself it lends itself kind of a kinesthetic perspective to the peer coach. And also, if you want students to set up their own tasks, well, you need to actually train them for do that. So, for example, you can in one free card to structure the task, to set up the task, and then the students themselves autonomously, they reproduce or replicate that task setup in their own cards. So they have room to make an interpretation and to put in practice that knowledge. For example, if you, at a given point, if the guided observation means that, well, the teacher not simply and always steps in to correct, to provide feedback on some tactical error, tactical problem. So the goal is that progressively we include students themselves in doing that. So we kind of reshape the intervention. In this case, the teacher is talking with the peer coach, and instead of stepping in and stating the problem to the whole team, is kind of prompting a reflection, an observation to the game problem that is happening with the student that will mediate then the intervention. So the student will now step in when the problem arises, and he himself will kind of lead the feedback. So the teacher needs to put some structure in between and not expect that students will simply have those skills. For example, if you want to include students in student-led task design, so that they, at a given point, they start to design their own tactical, their own solutions. So you can set a pre-lesson briefing, like a seminar, let's call it like this, with these coaches, with students, leaders, and then you work on the task that they presented to you, and explore the task in terms of what kind of decision making and skills are prompt from the specific task that they present, and if that is appropriate to the problem that they want to solve. So you can simply, before the lesson, work this out with them, and then retweak the task a bit. Sorry. So you need to work, and for example, can also scaffolding upon previous tasks that you do, and explore how the context shapes the tactical decisions they need to put. And also, for example, if you want students themselves to present the tasks with good instruction, so you need to guide them. For example, you can set up students to present the task, and as they go, you kind of cue in and fill in the gaps, the potential gaps in their instruction. Okay, now do a demonstration, or you weren't that specific. Can you make a question? Why don't you ask this or that? So you kind of guide them through their task presentation. So in the next step, of course, it's supposed that they try to do it autonomously and successfully. So this leads us to go back to the first proposal. So as if you recall, a typical tactical games session with content progression, game 1, game 2, and go back to game 1 plus. So if you recall, in which the teacher could share responsibility with students. Okay. Now, if you can input, include those instruction strategies, scaffolding strategies, it is, well, simpler. So in this task, the main task, you can do guided practice. So present the task to the whole class before the students themselves introduce the task. In here, you can introduce guided observation, and then, well, you are sharing feedback with students themselves, and they will also step in to provide instruction. And in this task, for example, you can set the students themselves to restate the game one, and then you guided that task presentation. So it simply appeals to a reconfiguration of the level of responsibility that we set for the teacher and students, and then support that kind of action, pedagogical action throughout. Okay, I hope this was insightful and enjoyable and makes sense to you. And don't forget to leave your question on the Padlet, okay? So I will be glad to discuss this more with you again. Thank you.